Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we have kind of a random topic that delved into more random topics, but originally it was supposed to be about human farms. The best way that I can explain that is selective breeding of women or forced breeding. But obviously, the word human farms just sounds like farms that humans tend to, or something like that. And maybe it's that I don't understand how to use search tools correctly, but I really found no information on this topic, and the closest that I could get was forced breeding, Hitler's attempts at eugenics, and eugenics in general. And because farm is part of the search, obviously, the origins of agriculture kept popping up. So instead of a deep dive into what sounded like an interesting topic straight out of a dystopian horror novel, we will take a medium dive into all of the topics that I mentioned and try to understand the ethics and why this is such of a concerning part of history, even if human farms never existed. Never. So, forced breeding during slavery. Often throughout history, when the population cannot keep up with men's violent actions, they resort to forced breeding, forced birth, etc. A lot of the things that currently are happening keep in line with a lot of the things that have happened throughout history, though they do not give you easy access to the information in history books. To be an educated person, you have to make a constant attempt to find the right source materials, because the stories that we're given are most often the ones that are written by the victors. Like, my parents always told me, there's your version of the story, there's my version of the story, and there's the truth. There's things that I experience differently, there's things that other people experience differently, and no matter how accurate they want to tell you that the history books are, it's never going to completely grasp what actually happened. During slavery, one of the ways that they kept sure that the population of laborers stayed high enough was by forcing relationships between enslaved men and women. Oftentimes, white enslavers would also, I don't know if I can say this word or if it'll, YouTube will take down my video, but R word, the women they enslaved. However, while they maintained forced breeding, they never addressed the issues that were causing these people to die. Pregnancy is already arduous, and on top of that, living conditions were horrible. People were exhausted and malnourished. Furthermore, white doctors handled many of the births of enslaved children and was largely exploitative. They experimented on black women's bodies without anesthesia or consent. Many doctors today hold implicit biases in understanding women's, specifically with an emphasis on black women's pain, because they taught that black people felt less or no pain compared to white people. James Marion Sims was called the father of gynecology, which was attributed to him for his gruesome treatment of black bodies. Only after many unsuccessful and life-threatening experiments did he create a treatment deemed safe enough to use on white bodies. Suggested readings for this section: for people that don't know this history or want to learn more, read Medical Apartheid: The Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present by Harriet A. Washington. Other notable books are Killing the Black Body, Race, Reproduction, and the Meaning of Liberty by Dorothy Roberts, and Medical Bondage, Race, Gender, and the Origins of American Gynecology by Deirdre Cooper Owens. Also, The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism by Edward E. Baptist, and Slavery by Another Name: The Re-Enslavement of Black Americans from Civil War to World War II by Douglas A. Blackman? I probably said that wrong. Though enslaved women tried to resist through the help of black midwives within the plantation community, they were demonized for their attempts at reproductive liberty. When a woman gave birth to a stillborn baby or the child died shortly after, they were criminalized. It's happening still today. There was one instance that was dramatized as an example of a monstrous black mother, that of Margaret Garner. She killed one of her children and wounded others while attempting to take the lives of her children and herself when faced with re-enslavement. Need you be reminded they used enslaved children as alligator bait, and dying was often much kinder than suffering at the hands of enslavers' depravity. American slavery is vastly different from any sort of slavery across history for the sole fact that it is so brutal. They treated lynchings as a family event, and it is disgusting for anyone to try and cover up or forget this part of history. We need to know these things and sit with them uncomfortably so that they never become normalized. It should make you feel queasy and a lot angrier with racists for so unabashedly supporting one of the darkest times in American history. Dynamics in our society have forever shifted, and white people will never be oppressed here. We should be grateful that most of the black community just wants to be on equal footing in society and not get even. Also, it should not make you mad when we talk about everyone being treated evenly in society, because what do you mean Not every kid deserves to eat lunch just because their parents' socioeconomic status. And not everyone deserves access to healthcare, as if the disabled community is not one you can join at any given time because life takes unexpected paths. Seriously, some people need that reality check. We used to have to scavenge for food, and I'm not saying you should not have to provide value in society, but that looks different for everyone. A person that does not have legs should not be expected to run a mile for a meal. Obviously metaphorically, but you get the point. Kind of went off on a tangent there, but we're back to it. The next section, eugenics and Hitler's attempts at creating a master race. Provided below in the description is a link to the history of eugenics. If you have little or no understanding of what it is, you should read into it. Short answer though is that eugenics are largely a discredited set of beliefs and behaviors for the purpose of improving the genetic quality of a population. Basically, anyone or anything they deem not worthy or of any value they try to breed out of a bloodline. Furthermore, there is a lot of history in which any number of deplorable things have been done to people with disabilities, which I encourage you to do your own research into, because if I added that topic on top of this, I would seriously have so many pages, people would not find the energy to read this. Obviously, it's different for a YouTube video. Either way, I encourage you to do your own research because it's still an important part of history. I am making the presumption that it is a common understanding that Hitler believed in an Aryan race or master race. However, something people may not know is that there was a compulsory sterilization within his reign. During the 1930s, some number of 400,000 Germans were sterilized to purify the Aryan racial stock. Sterilizations were also forced on thousands of concentration camp inmates in the 1940s, and they also they murdered disabled people. Anyways, relating this back to the previous section, selective breeding was a thing in American slavery, which seems like a cop-out or a softer way of saying eugenics to water down how horrible the treatment actually was. It was a prioritizing of whatever they considered to be the most desirable traits. In that case was most often athletic or stronger bodies that would not break as easily from the excruciatingly hard labor and abuse that they had to endure to continue to drive profits. There was a distinction between when they tried to breed for certain traits and when they were encouraging larger families just to sell them, but ultimately speaking, it was all about driving profits. Another way that these topics are correlated is that the Nazis were inspired and admired the Jim Crow laws and debated if they should introduce similar segregation in Germany. Jim Crow laws influenced the Nuremberg laws. Interracial marriage was illegal in the United States until 1967, and even then, 16 states still had laws that made it illegal. Similarly, Germans and Jews were not allowed to have relations or get married because they wanted to protect German blood and avoid mixed-race children. Everything is always connected, and along with that, most of history is much more brutal than they want you to know. Okay, suggested reading. Potentially interesting in understanding both these leaders and current leaders. I have a source linked below that talks about a certain person's drug use, but you should read Blitzed, Drugs in the Third Reich by Norman Ohler. Specifically valuable reads War Against the Weak, Eugenics in America's Campaign to Create a Master Race, expanded edition by Edwin Black. The Nazi Doctors, Medical Killing and the Psychology of Genocide by Robert J. Lifton. Forgotten Crimes, The Holocaust and People with Disabilities by Suzanne E. Evans, and Asperger's Children, The Origins of Autism in Nazi Vienna by Edith Schaeffer. Hitler's American Model, The United States and the Making of Nazi Race Law by James Q. Whitman, and also The 100 Years' War in Palestine, A History of Settler Colonization and Resistance, 1917 to 2017 by Rashid Khalidi, because it is correlated. Also, I'll type in the description all the names of these books. Lastly, the history of agriculture, I guess. On a somewhat lighter note, the farms part of the original search led to agriculture popping up often. I do also think that this topic is correlated back to the first section, specifically relating to the suggested readings, The Half Has Never Been Told, Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism by Edward E. Baptist. They counted on free labor to boost the economy, then becoming the biggest cotton producer globally during a time when the demand for cotton was so high. The farm systems that they use are not the most beneficial because it would be absurd to look at the way people that cultivated lands prior to stealing them as a guide. Sarcastic, obviously. And the United States was built on the backs of black and brown folks. So, without further ado, here's what I found to be interesting in my research on the history of agriculture. Wild grains were collected and eaten from at least 104,000 years ago. though domestication occurred much later. In South America, agriculture began as early as 9000 BC, with the potato being domesticated between 8000 BC and 5000 BC. Cotton was domesticated in Peru by 4200 BC. Irrigation, crop rotation, and fertilizer were introduced after the Neolithic Revolution and developed much further in the past 200 years. Though some plants do not need to be rotated, there are some flaws within the United States farming regulation. Standard practice, as noted by the USDA, is provided in the links below. Modern agriculture raises issues including water pollution, biofuels, genetically modified organisms, etc. Yet the indigenous people of the eastern U.S. domesticated numerous crops, and those in now California and the Pacific Northwest practiced forest gardening and controlled burns, which prevented catastrophic fires. In fact, the natives had a system of companion planting, the Three Sisters, 3 crops that complemented each other planted together. For example, squash, corn, and beans. The corn provides structure for the beans to climb, the beans provide nitrogen to the soil necessary for other crops, and the squash spread across the ground, blocking sunlight and stopping weeds from growing. Also worthy of note, white settlers thought that the land was untouched wilderness because it did not look the way farms that they had experienced had, and so obviously it must be that no one was tending to it. Which then, when they created the Park Service to keep lands untouched after they messed with stuff, they went with a hands-off conservation strategy because of their beliefs that no one was tending to it. The indigenous folks were just doing such a scientifically sound, in other words brilliant, way of tending to the land that they did not have to regulate it as often. The colonizers essentially thought that to keep the land in its pristine condition, nobody could touch it. And this in part is why so many, truthfully a majority of people, are completely detached from the processes in which we get our food. Suggested reading, just to give you a book that covers inadvertently all the previously mentioned topics, because unfortunately this is correlated across almost all things in American history, and understanding it means understanding this writing or video on a personal level, on a more personal level. Read Anti-Intellectualism in American Life by Richard Hofstadter. Closing remarks. So, just to close everything out, racism, classism, and their role in the development of capitalism have been the foundation of everything as to why we meaning society and our individual, emotional, and other forms of intelligence capacities, are how we are today. This constant pressing from overconsumption, consumerism, and complete detachment from all information and history focuses to the point of anti-intellectualism and for the purposes of cognitive dissonance. So folks do not have to feel bad about the horrors they have perpetrated, as well as the ones they themselves and others have faced. Yet also, because keeping people fearful of intelligence and willfully ignorant for the fear of recognizing and addressing personal flaws seeks to benefit mainly one group of people, the oppressors. Many people choose to throw their punches at the jaws of those suffering a same but different fate as they are in modern day. So let this serve as your constant reminder. It is painted as a race, gender, religion, sexuality, whatever issue, but ultimately it will always come back to a class issue. If you are given a common enemy, then you do not focus on the ones who are truly benefiting from your suffering. Anywho, I hope this was interesting and made some sort of sense, and I also hope it encourages you to do further research and allows you to understand these topics to a deeper ability. I have faith in humanity and faith in you to understand right from wrong, because I know you are trying if you are hearing this message. If your goal is to be educated and to continue to learn, then I am forever grateful that you are here and taking the time to listen to my wording of these topics, and I'm just glad that you're here. I will keep all my sources in the description, and I will have them sectioned based on which part of the reading or video that they belong to. And I'll also provide the book names and my Patreon if any of you guys would like to take a look at the reading or just help support me. I appreciate it greatly. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. And I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a great day. And I will see you guys in the next video.